When we hear every day about wars, sectarian violence, and terrorist attacks, the idea of interfaith harmony can sound like a pipe dream. Still, the people have faith. And in 2010, the United Nations General Assembly unanimously adopted a resolution designating the first week in February as World Interfaith Harmony Week. The Council of Religious Leaders of Metropolitan Chicago has endorsed this year's Harmony Week, and its theme is We Are All Connected by Compassion. To learn more, we welcome Dr. Larry Ulrich, Chair of the World Interfaith Harmony Week for the Council of Religious Leaders of Metropolitan Chicago. We also welcome Ndidi Amatula Okapu, representing the Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago. Tell us, first of all, why we have Interfaith Harmony Week.
Well, as you were saying in the introduction, it was approved by the United Nations unanimously. The reason they were doing it was because of recognizing the moral force in the world religions around the globe. War, torture, environmental destruction, hunger, lack of housing. These issues aren't resolved well by politicians. And the moral force of the various religions are able to speak to the world in a different way.
Okay. And Ndidi, you have done lots of other interfaith work. Why interfaith?
I mean, it's something that I've just always been accustomed to personally. I just lived in a very diverse community. But I think in terms of, as a global focus, interfaith is important because we have to be connected. We live on this planet Earth together. And for different faith leaders and faith communities, we have more commonalities than we have differences as creatures and servants of God.
Is compassion a virtue?
It is a virtue in philosophy. Like love is a virtue, its opposite is hate. Faith, doubt. Hope, despair. The opposite of compassion is malice. And behind the violence that occurs in our streets, that occurs around the world, are people usually who are afraid, and it turns into anger, hatred, prejudice, and then it becomes action. And that action is malice.
Okay. So in choosing this as the theme for Interfaith Harmony Week, what is Chicago aiming to do?
Well, we're both responding to the international theme, and we're trying to focus on interfaith relationships and advocacy in a culture of violence. Everyone knows the violence we have here in Chicago is outrageous. And one of the things is how the Council of Religious Leaders can respond working across the lines in the community, from your neighbor next door to officials in the government.
Now, Ndidi, it sounds like you have a long background in doing interfaith work. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got involved and started in this?
Well, when I was a young girl, my mom's an activist, and she is, very involved in the D.C. area before we moved to Chicago. And I was involved with the Interfaith Conference in Metropolitan Washington, D.C.
Okay.
As one of their youth Muslim representatives. And then a little later when I came to Chicago, I was working with the late leader, Imam Wahiduddin Muhammad. And he had forged this relationship with Lady Chiara Lubbock of the Folklore Movement, which is an organization based out of Trent, Italy.
Okay.
And basically, they really seek to embody the beauty and warmth and kindness of Mother Mary.
Okay.
And through their work, they reach out to various develop long-lasting relationships with members of various faiths, including the Muslim religion. So a lot of my work has been heavily, at least the last 7 years or so, I've been in interfaith relations with the Folklore movement. And I'm just very passionate. I mean, my mother converted to Islam years ago, and my family on my father's side is Catholic, on my grandmother's side is Baptist. I have some Jehovah's Witness, so we have a myriad of diversity in my family. So it's something that I've just always been around and find very important to move forward as a community, as the global community.
It sounds like it's innately a part of who you are. Some people might listen to this and think that it is kind of a pipe dream, and what can 1 week of interfaith harmony really do for the wars we see and the gun violence we see on the news? Could either of you speak to that?
Well, if it was only 1 week, probably nothing.
Okay.
It helps reinforce establishing relationships, key word in interfaith, the relationships that continue. It means that people anywhere are able to relate with their neighbors, and a lot of times we see the actions that aren't relating well. The second part is interfaith advocacy. The advocacy isn't back toward interfaith organizations. It is advocacy of working together to tackle the problems that are in our society, to be able to do some things that the political world, government world can't do, but primarily to be building what was said before, just being able to love your neighbor as yourself. Tough thing to do.
People do think sometimes, I think about the differences and the uniqueness between the different faith groups. Am I right? There are 8 traditions represented in the Interfaith
In the council, that's correct.
What are some of the things both of you have discovered that are in common? You brought up Mary.
Well, you know, I feel that, well, in the Quran, it says, "La yu'minu ahadukum hatta yuhib li akhihi ma yuhib li nafsihi." And it's saying none of you truly believe until you love for your brother that which you love for yourself. So it's the qualification to even become a believer, that it puts this requirement that you can give freely of that which you love to your brother, to your neighbor, and to others. And we find in our interfaith work that we have more commonalities than not, because it's not that euphemism, so to speak, is not uncommon or not unlike the concept of love thy neighbor as thyself. So the things that we have in common are much more stronger and deeper and longer lasting than that which we have, which makes us different. And we do have our differences, and that's fine. We do agree, though, that God did create all of us, and he created us obviously with differences. We need to get to know one another. We have this responsibility as his servants to build and share and create, and and to have peace, to live together in peace. And so the only way to do that is to kind of lead by example.
Okay.
Just to be following up, the interfaith movement is not oriented to having everybody adopt a new religion.
Okay.
It isn't oriented to having people go from one religion to another.
Sure.
The main function is to help strengthen the believer in any religion to be better engaged in their own religion than they had been before.
And what are some of the events that the Interfaith Harmony Week will offer to facilitate that?
Well, there are different kinds of emphases. One is having the Interfaith Harmony Week known during worship experiences in these various faith traditions. One is responding in terms of community service locally, but together. Another part is working at national issues. Right now, gun legislation is a very hot topic, and additionally is being able to celebrate together and to learn together. As I was saying before, our focus is going to be on violence.
Okay. You've done this work for a long time. People often critique all kinds of religions, I think, because of their sense of exclusivity. Mm-hmm. Do you have any stories, either of you, to share about challenges to that exclusive nature of religion?
Well, when I was at the Parliament of World Religions, and the parliament that they held in Melbourne, Australia. And there was a particular program there for young faith leaders, and it was focusing on educating faith leaders for a multi-religious community. And so we split up into different sections of Muslims and Christians and Jews and things like that. And you had people from rabbinical schools and divinity schools and things like that. And it was really interesting. It was a young rabbi in training. And he was saying that I want to learn about you, but not from you. And I was trying to understand, you know, kind of how that works. Like, what was the qualification? Why do you want to learn about me, but not from me? And he was saying, because I'm concerned that I might find something that would challenge my own faith. And I thought that was a really interesting concept. And, you know, I was telling him about some of the works that I've done with, like, organizations like the Folklore movement, and how we learn from each other. Like, I'm 100% proud and strong in my, you know, belief of Islam as my religion. But I also can learn from, you know, others, as I've learned from some of my Christian friends, in terms of, you know, that like for the Folklore, their love of Mary and how kind and how kind, just when you're around them, they're just so kind to one another. And then they see us with we stop whatever we're doing when it's time for prayer, and we make our 5 prayers. So, and through these ways, we don't lose who we are, but we kind of learn different points to strengthen ourselves. There's a concept of, you know, that God created us to learn one another, to get to know one another. So made us different so that we can get to know one another. So we just kind of, we're not trying to create any kind of like pseudo-utopia, you know, we just want plurality.
Okay. And Dee Dee brings up fear, which is something that you pointed out at the beginning. Dr. Elric, do you have any more to say about that?
Well, I think the statement from the rabbinical student was very interesting, because anxiety going into the relationships is always there. But you begin to learn a lot of things. You mentioned Mary. There are more references in the Quran to Mary than there are in the New Testament. Most Christians don't even think that that's obtainable or possible. That's a part of where I feel like I'm nurtured by persons who are from other faiths and from other denominations in the Christian faith. The part of learning to trust one another is something the Council of Religious Leaders really works at, has for a quarter of a century. And that grows to where I can say, honestly, I trust people in the council as much, sometimes more, than some of the people in my own denomination.
As we kind of struggle with the growing pains of our very intercultural, interfaith reality, what gives you hope about the work you're doing and that it will lead to peace of some sort?
It's expanding. It's not fizzling out. It's not a fad. It's the continuation of what had been the ecumenical movement in the United States, which is probably from the 40s, although some went way back before that. And they progressively, these would be Christian ministers, Protestants, included Roman Catholics. Next step was including Jews, then Muslims. And now it's much easier in a local community to have many faiths involved locally than it was 35, 40 years ago. That, I think, is a strength that's going to continue.
And Dee Dee, you've done a lot of work with young people. What impact do you think this work and the current leadership is going to have on future generations and the future of our world?
Well, it's really important to be educating communities and youth now, because the youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow. And it's scary to think of a world where people are completely intolerant or just unaware of other faith communities and make decisions based upon, you know, or without that level of information. A lot of crises that happen in the world and catastrophes happen and happen in the world based upon fear. And the fear is often based upon a lack of knowledge or ignorance. And so we are often afraid of those things that we don't know about. And when we become more educated about the other, then we realize, okay, this is my neighbor. This person is not as scary. This person, actually, I have commonalities with this person. This is really important for the youth of today, because the youth of today will be the future Barack Obamas and the future, just leaders of the free world. And, so it's just something that is so critical in terms of not even just educating in the schools, but also in the mosque, in the synagogue, the churches, and in the local communities.
In closing, tell us if, for viewers that live in Chicago, there's a breakfast coming up. There are a couple events in Chicago that we might want to do a plug for.
The breakfast is being sponsored by the Council of Religious Leaders,
all right,
and that's on February the 7th. It is another occasion when the leaders of denominations or other faith groups examine major issues, major problems. In this one, it is a breakfast, but it moves right into a forum, and it's going to be accenting on violence. Different members of the council are going to speak how the violence affects them as believers and affects their various communions. And Anita Alvarez, the state's attorney for Cook County, is going to be showing how the whole progression up the legal system works at violence and how the council can be more effective.
Well, this is such a huge topic. Thank you so much, Dr. Ulrich and Ndidi, for being here today.
Thank you.
I'm Polly Toner for Different Drummers and the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries. Keep the faith.